Hey guys, back at it. NBA recaps. 14 weeks into the NBA season now. For the 14th time, I'm giving y'all the NBA weekly recap. My name is Rencity. I have a weekly podcast, sports and shorts of sorts. Drops every Monday. Go over the week in sports. End it with a little short story of my own. The only thing I didn't have room for NBA contact was running long. Lots of NBA contact, so I said, you know what? Let's just do an NBA one. This is it. 14 weeks now. Let's jump into it. Let's start. Well, you know what? Instead of starting with their divisional recap, the All-Star reserves were announced. Oh, excuse me. Let's start with that. I was watching it live with the wife. I had my picks on my phone. I was fairly close, a few wrong, and I'll let you know as we go through them here. Yeah, I went over the starters last episode. Let's go over the reserves. The Western Conference. Two players coming out of Minnesota, Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. Two players out of Clipperville, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Staying in LA, you got the Lakers, Anthony Davis. And then finally, Steph Curry, the Golden State Warriors, and Devin Booker, the Suns. Out east, even two New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson. That was a for sure one, and I thought the other one might have a shot. Julius Randle, Cleveland's Donovan Mitchell, Boston's Jaylen Brown, Miami's Bam Adebayo, Philadelphia's Tyrese Maxey, and Paolo Banchero. So you look at these announcements, a few caught me off guard. In the West, much like the TNT crew was saying, I had De'Aaron Fox over Karl Anthony Towns. I wore the jersey in support. Or you could have the argument even if it's Fox's teammate, DeMontis Sabonis, I don't, those guys, the Kings are still doing pretty good this year to have no representation in the All-Star game. Kind of weird. I mean, looking at the team, it would have been cool to have Wembanyama in there. I know his numbers aren't good enough, but that would have been cool to see. He's got plenty in his future. And I know Kyrie's missed a lot of games. His numbers aren't quite as good, but he's always so much fun to watch in the All-Star game. And I don't know. You can't hate on the Cat pick. The guy, he's put up over 60 points in a game this year, and he's on the best team in the West. So you got award winning, but it would have been good to see one of the Kings on the team, maybe Fox. But anyway, in the East, I still feel no love for Trae Young. He's got good numbers. Second in the league in assists. But I do like the Randall choice. He had a tough start to the beginning of the year, but he's really turned it around. The shoulder injury, just brutal. But I thought Young would make it. On my phone, I wrote Young. I thought Young would have made it. And like I said, he'll probably miss the game. So Commissioner Adam Silver, he'll have to pick a replacement. I think he'll be Young. I'm hoping it is. And the choice I got wrong, I didn't pick Bam Adebayo. I was similar to what Reggie Miller was kind of preaching. I was on the Derek White train, Celtics, best team in the league. But you can't hate on the Adebayo pick. The Heat have had a lot of injuries, and Bam's been doing what he can there. But yeah, you can't really take any of those guys off. Well deserved. Congrats to them. And let's jump to the team breakdown. We'll start in the Eastern Conference, the Atlantic Division, like we always do, with the best team in the NBA by record, the Boston Celtics, 2-2 this past week, suffering just their second loss at home on the season to the LA Clippers. Then they'd win two close games, one over the Pelicans and one over the Pacers. And then they'd lose their third game at home to another LA team, this time the Lakers. But it was a bit of a surprise because there was no LeBron James or Anthony Davis. So, yeah, that was a bit of a shock to them. The Clippers, that was a bad loss, but the Lakers loss, that was a little bit worse. So I'm not worried, though. I'm not too worried about the Celtics teams. The Celtics teams, all right? It's just a lull. I think they'll bounce back from this. Not a very good outing by Jaylen Brown, though. He scored 8 against the Clippers, and 8 against the Lakers just after being announced as reserved for the All-Star game. So that's not ideal. So as long as the Celtics don't meet an LA team in the finals, maybe they'll be okay. But, man, they seem to have their number here. Well, stick in the Atlantic, obviously, going to the next team. Wait a minute. No, not the Philadelphia 76ers, but the New York Knicks. Yes, they're up to second in the division, third in the conference, going 4-0 this past week. 9-game winning streak. Knicks trounce the Heat and MSG. They go into Charlotte, beat the Hornets. They return home, beat the Jazz, and then they beat the Pacers in a close one. The last three games, they'd have no OG Anunoby or Julius Randle. Like I said, he had that shoulder injury, and Anunoby's got an elbow issue. Brunson, he showed he can be the guy of this team, regardless of size. Was everybody has been saying and bringing up his size, but he's been doing it all. I thought he'd be an all-star starter. He's obviously on the team as a reserve. Those injuries to OG and Randall are huge, obviously. The team stepped up though. Dante DiVincenzo, he's got a flamethrower as an arm right now. He's shooting lights out. Precious Achua, part of the OG trade there. He's putting in big minutes here, and he's producing. 12 points and 16 rebounds in that win over the Pacers. It's massive. He seems to fit perfectly next to Hartenstein up there. And it's unsure when OG will come back from that when he'll come back from that elbow injury. It's rumored to be quicker than what Randall will be with his shoulder. Like I said, a bummer. The guy was just named as an all-star reserve. But hopefully he can come back quick from that. But as long as Brunson's balling, this team will continue to thrive. Like 40 against the Pacers, he's doing great. I'm glad he's going to the All-Star game, and I'm glad he's starting to get some recognition for what he's doing in New York on that crazy run right now. Next up in the Atlantic, it's that Philadelphia 76ers team I was mentioning. They went 1-3 this past week, and it's been kind of a rough go. They lost in Denver to the Nuggets in a close one, but all the talk was about how Embiid was a last-minute scratch from the game. Not long before the game was about to start, it was announced he'd be out with soreness in the right knee. The league did not like that and fined the Sixers $75,000 for failing to include Embiid on the report in an accurate and timely manner. He'd missed the next game against Portland, and the Portland Trailblazers blew out the Sixers. It's like Embiid felt gutted and almost guilted into returning to the next game against the Warriors. He didn't look himself. He looked injured. And as he dove for a ball, Jonathan Kuminga landed on his knee, causing Embiid to leave the game. He'd missed the next one against the Jazz, and it was diagnosed he'd have a meniscus injury. It's uncertain how much time he's going to miss and the extent of this injury, but it'll probably take him out of the MVP race for missing too many games. It's a bummer for the Sixers, a bummer for the NBA, but you know what? Tyrese Maxey came to the rescue against the Jazz just hours after being announced that he'd be an All-Star Game reserve. Much deserved, by the way. Maxey would drop his second 50-burger of the year, scoring 51 in a thrilling road win over the Jazz. Big congrats to Tyrese for carrying the team and ending that Sixers 4-game losing streak. But as I've preached many times on this show, this team goes as far as Embiid can take them. And a lot of people are saying he was forced to go out against Golden State even though he wasn't ready, just to try to appease the 65 games minimum rule to be eligible to win awards. And, a lot of people are not liking this load management rule because these are real injuries, and he was forced to go out there to, I don't know, they're trying to nip people sitting at games and, affecting the paying customer, but I don't know what they're going to do. It's a bummer. We have an MVP candidate that probably won't win the MVP because he'll miss too many games, but has put up some of the best numbers we've seen. But if he does miss the All-Star game, maybe Derek White will sneak in there, or Trae Young's got to get in there. But anyway, next in the Atlantic, we'll go back to New York. Brooklyn Nets went 2-1 this past week, all games at home. Won a close one over the Rockets before crushing the Jazz by 33 points. And then the Suns came to town and beat them by 16. Cam Thomas has found his way back in the starting lineup. Seems to have helped the Nets a bit. He was huge in that win over the Rockets, scoring a game-high 37, and he had back-to-back 25-point games. Found his groove a little more lately, much like the guy we saw in the beginning of the year before he sustained an injury. But, the biggest thing on this team is inconsistency, right? You don't know who's coming. Bridges has been balling out, and he seems to be pretty consistent. But other than that, you don't know who's showing up. I'm liking how the former Spur, Lonnie Walker the fourth, he's been getting some more minutes, and it seems to be helping the Nets. But it's like rolling the dice. You don't know what you're getting with them. Or a box of chocolates, if you want to refer to a Hollywood movie. But we'll wrap up the Atlantic, go to Toronto. Raptors went 1-2 this past week. First losing by 20 to the Clippers, and Kawhi Leonard's returned to the city where he won a title. They would then lose to the Hawks in one of the wildest endings you'll ever see. The Raptors would miss a shot. Hawks got the rebound. They're looking to trap the Hawks Trae Young, who just kind of threw the ball away. Raptors steal it, get the go-ahead bucket, and it looked like they had the win. And then Trae Young went to the hoop, missed the shot, but no one blocked out Sadiq Bey, and he'd put the putback basket in, and Atlanta would get the win. A tough loss for Toronto. They bounced back from that really tough loss by going into Chicago and beating the Bulls, and It's been a tough go for the Raptors, new coach of the season, mid-season trades, involving core players. Injury bug, right? Pirtle's been missing those games. You had Quickly missing all the games last week. RJ missed two of them. A lot of those losses, the Raptors are just taking it inside. They're getting killed. Especially on the offensive glass. Their defensive rebounding has just kind of been atrocious. Jonte Porter, he's been getting some minutes here and there. A great touch and good shooter, but he's getting killed inside. They've been playing Thaddeus Young at 6'8", at center. He's been getting killed. They need Pirtle back, that putback against Atlanta. Sadiq Bey showed how thin they are inside, which made that win over the Bulls very impressive. A team with Vucevic and Drummond should probably beat the Raptors. But anyway, yeah, we'll see what this Raptors team is made up, and maybe by next episode, this team could be different. We have the February 8th trade deadline coming up. Might have a whole different Raptors team next episode. We'll see. It's tough go for him lately, though. Scotty Barnes has been the one consistency there. And Trent Jr.'s shot seems to have gotten better the last bit. Maybe he's trying to avoid a trade or get traded, but we'll see. Next, we go to the Central Division, starting with the division-leading Milwaukee Bucks, second best record in the Eastern Conference. They went 1-3 this past week, and now whopping 0-2 with new coach Doc Rivers running the team. The Bucks lost at home to a good-looking Cavs team after beating them the game prior there. They were then beat up on the Pelicans by 24 before losing in Denver and then losing again in Portland. Not the return Damian Lillard was hoping for, going back to the city where he played his first 11 seasons in the NBA. This team's got that title potential, but it's not been fully tapped yet, and I guess that's why the Doc was brought in. Biggest thing for this team, though, it's still the defense. They're ranked 19th in the league defensive rating, and they need to tune that up before they start talking title. Guys on TNT were joking about some potential all-star coaching, and it is a little wild. Celtics coach Joe Mazzulla can't coach the game. He coached it last year, and you can't coach it 2 years in a row, and the Celtics have the best record in the East. So we would have to go to the second-seeded team, which, like I said, is Milwaukee. The TNT guys are killing themselves. The idea of Doc Rivers, who just slithered his way into this role. He's 0-2 right now coaching the Bucks, and he could be coaching in the All-Star game. Kind of a kick in the balls to Adrian Griffin, who was fired. But, yeah, and this team, they're thinking bigger than that, though. They want to think title, more than All-Star. But, yeah, we'll see what Doc Rivers can do with this team. Next up in the division, the Cavaliers, one of the hottest teams in the NBA. They went 4-0 this past week, so on a 4-game winning streak. They won 12 of their last 13. They beat the Bucks, Clippers, Cavs, and Grizzlies this past week, getting healthy along the way. Evan Mobley's missed tons of games this season. He returned in that win against the Clippers. The following game against the Pistons, Darius Garland returned from injury. This team continues to win, and they're going to get even better with these guys coming back, and they're easing them into it because they're doing so damn well. Shout out to Donovan Mitchell. He's done a lot to carry this team, He was out with injuries earlier this year. I think that's what kept him out of being an all-star starter, because if you don't have those injuries earlier on, he'd probably be starting. But it's good to see him in the all-star game. Shouting out Karis LeVert for his work off the bench, trying to get in that six-man player of the year talk. Next up, Indiana Pacers, the sixth best record in the Eastern Conference. They went 2-2 this past week, winning a big one against the Suns, spoiling a big night by Devin Booker. They then beat the Grizzlies before losing a close one in Boston, and that one in Boston was bittersweet. Halliburton returned to the lineup, but, minutes restriction, easing him back into it. And when he was off the floor, Boston killed it. Pacers would then lose in MSG to the Knicks. Again, Halliburton looking good, but only allowed to play 22 minutes. And in crunch time, he was missed. And I know they don't want to risk another injury, but he's going to have to play maybe a little more in crunch time. You might have to split those minutes up somehow, but... yeah, they're on a current 2-game losing streak. Pascal's starting to fit in a little more, though, and the sudden emergence of Jalen Smith. He's looking really good. He's making Miles Turner maybe look movable by the deadline. His minutes have come down as Smith's have gone up. A lot of good teams will be looking at Miles Turner saying, is that our missing piece? It could be. He, when the right team, could be the difference, but I know the Pacers are looking to win now, too, so I don't know what they'd get back for him. It's very weird. Like I said, we could have a whole different Pacers team by next week. The luxury of depth, though. They have a lot of good young players on there, so they have the luxury to, shop around a bit. Anyway, we'll go to Windy City. The Bulls 2-1 this past week. They played some teams with some losing records, and they were probably hoping to win all three of those games. On the road, they beat the Portland Trailblazers before returning home and losing a tough one to the Raptors, which I mentioned earlier. Clear advantage inside that they failed to use. The Bulls would bounce back by going into Charlotte and beating up on the Hornets, and they're still trucking along here without Zach LaVine, who's still been out with injury and not been traded yet. No trades done at all yet. Terry Taylor and Julian Phillips have been getting some more time lately, I've noticed. So I don't know if the front office is just trying to see what they have before pulling a trigger on the trade, but I do feel like Chicago's on the verge of making a move soon here. If it's not this upcoming weekend, it's got to be on trade deadline day. I know they're not moving Kobe White. I think he's the untouchable right now, but I think everyone else, they got to be on the block, you know? We'll wrap up the Central Division, head to the basement of the Eastern Conference. The Pistons 1-2 this past week. Lost at home to the Wizards before hosting the Thunder and pulling off perhaps one of the upsets of the season, beating one of the best teams in the Western Conference this season by 16 points. They follow that up by losing a tough one in Cleveland, but this team has shown signs of improvement. Hard to say that about a 6-win team, but they did also tie the record for longest losing streak in the history of the NBA this season, so any kind of praise is good praise. That loss against the Wizards was tough, but that win against OKC, you know, no Cade Cunningham, no problem. Jalen Duren, he went for 20-20, 22 points, 21 boards, and even had 6 dimes, you know. Really nice team win, and I was engaging in some online comments pages about Cade Cunningham, you know, and how this team almost seems a little more confident without the former number overall pick in the lineup. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but maybe the Pistons move Cunningham, gets a few good vets to help develop this team a little more efficiently. There's young talent galore, and maybe a little addition by subtraction, you know. You get the ball in the hands of Jaden Ivey more. Maybe let Oscar Thompson and Marcus Sasser get more time, you know, and bringing a vet in might help, you know. I do see the sudden emergence here. Monte Morris. I know it's just a 4-game sample size, but in the 4 games Monte Morris has played this year, the Pistons have won 2 of them. You know, you can't hate on that. You know, when the team has a lot of negatives, you got to reach for some positives. But we'll wrap up the Eastern Conference, go to the Southeast Division. Division leading Miami Heat, 7th best record in the East. They went 1-2 this past week. They were beaten up in back-to-back games by the Knicks and Suns, and then they won a tight game over the Kings, which was massive for the Heat. Before that win over Sacramento, the Heat were on a 7-game losing streak, the longest in the Eric Spoelstra era. And it was also the first win since acquiring Terry Rozier from the Hornets. It seems like the Heat are still adjusting to the lineup change, and it's helped in some areas while hurting in others. While having Rozier, Butler, and Hero find out who needs to hold the ball and when. All good ISO guys trying to figure out when to get their touches and where on the floor, because it's only one ball. Bam Adebayo, he's been pretty consistent through all this, which is, the more I talk about it, explaining his deserved All-Star game nod. But this new addition of the Heat, it's kind of impacted one of our favorite rookies that we like to talk about on this show. This Terry Rozier time has taken away some Jaime Jaquez Jr. time. The rookie was playing some big minutes down the stretch and really doing awesome in it. Now Rozier's taking that spot, and Rozier, I don't know, what he has and adds to the team kind of takes. He doesn't have what Jaquez Jr. has, even as a rookie. But we'll see what happens. Spoelstra's a pretty good coach. He'll figure it out. Team tied for the division lead in that division, the Orlando Magic. They went 2-2 this past week. Very up and down week. They lost a tough one on the road in Memphis. Joe Ingles had a good look at the buzzer, but bad luck as he missed, and the Magic lost by 1 there. They bounced back in a big way, spoiling a big night by Devin Booker. Second time I've said that here. And a win over the Suns, and then they'd suffer heartbreak again. This time Franz Wagner would have a shot at the buzzer, and the Magic would lose to the Mavs in Dallas. But the Magic would bounce back again and beat my Spurs. So if this trend continues, the Magic should lose a close game to the Wolves tonight at the buzzer. We'll see if magic happens. I might put money on that, but we'll see. It should be a fun game, though. And props to Paulo Banchero, named his first All-Star game. He's been balling out this season, especially with the injuries the Magic have dealt with all season. We'll go from Florida to Georgia. The Atlanta Hawks going 2-1 this past week, losing a close one to the Mavs. the draft selection they might have traded back in 2018, Luka Doncic dropping 73 on them. The Hawks would then win that wild game over the Raptors I alluded to earlier. They would then beat down on a Lakers team that had no Anthony Davis but had a disgruntled looking LeBron James. And like a few other teams on this show, this team is the straight up. They're hard to read. You don't know who's coming. Some nights they look like one of the deepest teams in the league that can score from anywhere with 7 guys in double figures, like they did against the Lakers. They have 2 dynamic point guards and sharing a backcourt. One gets snubbed for All-Star games, and the other continues to be in trade talks. I know Trae Young's going to make it in the All-Star game. I mentioned it either for the injured Randall or Embiid. That sounds like DeJounte Murray will get moved by the deadline. Just a matter of to which team and for what back. Sounds like the Lakers are the favorites, but who are the Lakers willing to part with? It sounds like the Hawks want Reeves. That's not going to help their defensive rating, but it's interesting to see how the rest of this Hawks season go. They're 4th from the bottom of the league in defensive rating, and they could improve that just even a little bit. They can move up the standings, But we'll see what happens here. Next up in the Southeast, Charlotte Hornets. They went 0-4 this past week, currently owning the longest losing streak in the NBA at 5 games. Played all their games at home this past week, and they didn't really look threatening in any of them, to be fair. Maybe against the Bulls before absolutely blowing it in the 4th, but this team's in trouble. LaMelo returned from injury with that ankle injury, but he's missed the last 3 games with soreness on that same ankle. So I don't know how his future is looking with that ankle. Ankles are tough, and he's had some bad injuries with it. Miles Bridges has looked pretty good. Number 2 overall pick, Brandon Miller. He's looked really good with the extra responsibilities since the Terry Rozier trade. And props to PJ Washington, putting up some pretty big numbers off the bench. 43 off the bench in that loss to the Jazz. When you're putting 43 off the bench, that's something else. But without LaMelo Ball, this team's kind of in disarray, and this losing streak can go a little longer without their main guy. Wrapping up the Eastern Conference, we go to the Wizards. Washington Wizards went 2-1 this past week, and things have looked a little better in the American capital since Wes Unseld Jr. was removed as coach and replaced with interim Brian Keefe. I mean, the 2 wins the Wizards had were against the Pistons and Spurs. It's nothing to shake a stick at, I guess. But wins are wins, and the Wizards' loss was at home to the tough Clippers team. But this team's still out there fighting every night, and that's what you got to ask out of your team. Kyle Kuzma continuing to put up career numbers. I really like the play of Denny Avdia. I mentioned him. Tyus Jones, I see him maybe getting plucked up by a championship contending team. He's a steady Freddie point guard, Tyus Jones is great there, and the pickup of Marvin Bagley III's looked great. He's putting in big numbers coming off the bench now. Maybe third place is the charm for the former number 2 overall pick. He didn't make his mark in Golden State or Detroit, but maybe DC will be his home of his outcoming party. Off to the West now. Let's start in the Northwest Division. Team with the best record in the West, Minnesota Timberwolves. They went 2-1 this past week. Stunned by the Spurs in San Antonio. Karl Anthony Towns had a game-winning attempt at the buzzer, but it bounced out. And then the Wolves bounced back from that surprise loss with some big wins. First winning in Oklahoma City against the Thunder, where after the game, Anthony Edwards, who carried the team on his back in that game, he spoke out about the refs' lack of calls for the Wolves and the favoritism for the Thunder to a fine tune of a $40,000 fine. The Wolves would then destroy a Kyrie and Luka-less Mavs by a tune of 34 points, and this team continues to look like one of the best in the league. Consistency has been impressive. They've dropped a game here and there, but they have a young alpha dog leading this team, and you will lose a game here and there to this inexperience they have, but it's how this team bounces back from those letdowns, and they've bounced back great. Next in the division and in the conference, Oklahoma City Thunder. They went 2-2 this past week, beat up on a Pelicans team in New Orleans, and then I think they kind of overlooked their next match because they went in Detroit, lost to Detroit, to the team with the fewest wins in the NBA. They then would close out on the Timberwolves before losing that game, but they bounced back and they'd beat the Nuggets. I know Jokic didn't suit up for the Nuggets, but hey, a win's a win. SGA continues to look like an all-NBA player, and the team goes as he goes. J-Dub, Jalen Williams, he's a legit second scorer on this team who will make future All-Star games you watch. That win over the Nuggets was even more impressive because J-Dub didn't suit up. He had an ankle injury. Hopefully that's nothing serious. Chet Holmgren, he's had some up and downs. You know, that's what comes with being a rookie. Thunder have some games against the Hornets, Raptors, and Jazz, so they need to show up and not overlook them like they did in Detroit. They're still the second youngest team in the league. I have mentioned that a bunch, you know, and they will make mistakes, but you can't give away the games you're supposed to win. I'm sure Coach Mark Daigneault's been all over them, and we'll see what they do in those next few games here. Next up in the division, the fourth best record in the West, the defending champion Denver Nuggets. They went 2-1 this past week. Won some big games at home, beating an Embiid-less 76ers team and then a tough Milwaukee Bucks team. They then go into OKC and lose to the Thunder, like I said, without Jokic. He had some back soreness, so they rested him. Hopefully it's nothing long term. They're saying it's just some rest, so hopefully that's true. The Nuggets are looking like one of the best team in the league. Jokic has unreal video game numbers, like that triple double he put up against the Bucks in their win. Team is well rounded and looking very capable of repeating as champs. And some say Jamal Murray snubbed again his All Star game. I do understand his case, but I do think that time he missed with his injury that really hurt him in his case to make the All Star game. He's upped his game since coming back, but a little too late. And I think the Sacramento duo might have a bigger beef for the All Star snub than him, but still tough to believe a guy with Jamal Murray's playoff resume has not made an All Star game. It's amazing, you know? Like, just a reminder of how deep the Western Conference is and how much talent there is in the league right now. But maybe this snub will be extra motivation to help jumpstart him to a fantastic finish to the season and another title run to have our first back-to-back NBA champions since the 2018 Golden State Warriors. But we'll leave Colorado. We'll go to Utah. The Jazz went 1-3 this past week, picked up the big win in Charlotte, and then they lost three straight. That game against Brooklyn, that was ugly. I'm not sure if just being in New York was a little different than the usual life in Salt Lake City, but that 33-point beatdown was ugly. They followed that up with a loss to the Knicks, and they were definitely in that game against the Sixers, but Tyrese Maxey's 50-burger was just a little too much to handle. The Jazz have cooled off a bit from that winning streak they had earlier, but this team's still a tough out. Some say Lauri Markkanen was snubbed for not making the All-Star game, and his numbers are pretty good. I can see the argument, and the Jazz were actually winning, but you know, I'm okay with it. Not this year, but this team's looking their best when they're playing as a team. Colin Sexton was getting some flack for his tenaciousness against the Knicks, but I'd take that tenacious D on my team any day. And Jordan Clarkson off the bench, just lethal. The Jazz have some doozies coming up too, you know. See what this team really is like. You know, they got a home game against the Bucks and Thunder before going in the desert to take on the Suns. So we'll see what the Jazz has to play, what kind of tune they've got for us. Wrapping up in the Northwest, we'll go to Portland. The Trailblazers went 2-2 this past week. They'd go into San Antonio and get beaten pretty soundly. They follow that up by returning home and losing to the Bulls, and then they demolish a Joel Embiid-less 76ers, where Philly team just didn't show up. Then they spoiled the homecoming for Damian Lillard when the Bucks came to town, and their franchise leader in a lot of categories. They didn't want to let him get the win, though, and they stole it there. This team has looked good moments, you know. They've got that combination of youth and experience, and on some nights they've got the real deal, like against the Bucks. You have young and up and coming stars like Anthony Simons making huge buckets. Clutch plays by vets Jeremy Grant, Malcolm Brogdon, Scoot Henderson. He's starting to get some more consistency, which as a rookie is hard to do. And the biggest thing for a young NBA player, you know, is the ceiling like his is to bring that same play every night. And shout out to DeAndre Ayton. He talks a lot, says how much he's worth, and if he plays like he did against the Bucks every night, yeah, he'll be that max kind of player. We'll go from the Northwest to the Pacific, starting with the division-leading Clippers, the third best record in the West. They went 3-1 this past week, taking on some Eastern competition. Beat down the Raptors before going into Boston and humbling the Celtics on their home floor. They go into Cleveland, lose to a tough Cavs team. Like I said, the Cavs have been playing some good ball. And then it was a nice little battle between Donovan Mitchell and Kawhi Leonard. Clippers then took care of the Wizards easily, and they continued their long East road trip, playing in Detroit, Miami, and Atlanta before returning home to face the Pelicans. Kawhi Leonard was named an All-Star reserve in the West, deservedly so. His numbers are quite similar to teammate Paul George, which is probably why Paul George was also named an All-Star. But, this team is so deep. Since Westbrook moved to the bench, this team has been one of, if not the best teams in basketball. It seems like Ty Lue and the team's got to figure it out. You know what you're getting from Kawhi and PG every night. Harden too. He's either throwing up the assist or throwing up the points, whatever the team needs. He seems to sense it. Maybe he is the system, as he said. He wasn't lying. But Zubac has a calf injury. Sidelining him for weeks. But the additions this team made, having Plumlee and Tice in the middle, they're holding down the fort. And you're going to get something big, but who's it going to be from? Is it going to be Norm Powell? It's going to be Russell Westbrook. Amir Coffey's getting in the mix. This team is stacked. You do not want to play them in the playoffs. It's scary. That's the only thing that can hurt this team is injuries. I'm hoping they stay healthy. I want to see what this team can do. Let's see it, hopefully. Next up in the Pacific, the Sacramento Kings, a team with the fifth best record in the conference, and a team with no All-Stars in the game. Crazy. Kings went 2-1 this past week, beating the Mavs in a close one where De'Aaron Fox outdueled Luka Doncic. They then crushed a depleted Grizzlies team. Sabonis, huge 2020 game, 20 points and 26 rebounds. Told you all Jaren Jackson Jr. doesn't rebound until Sabonis exposed it in that game. Kings would suffer then their only loss of the week, losing to a motivated Heat team looking to end their losing streak. Sabonis and Fox both look like all-stars. Neither made the game. That could be some extra motivation, help them kick a good second half of the season here. They seem to... We know what you're getting out of those guys. Then they have their rotating door as third scorer. Could be Malik Monk off the bench looking to get that Sixth Man of the Year trophy. Keegan Murray or Kevin Huerter. They've been doing pretty good. Keegan Murray had a big outing the other night. Kevin Huerter's shot was looking not very good early in the season, but Red Velvet's kind of found it as of late, which is very big for the Kings. We'll see what they can do in the upcoming week here. We'll leave California for a sec to go to the desert, go to the Phoenix Suns. They went 2-2 this past week, losing to the Pacers by 2 despite Devin Booker dropping 62 points. He was cooking, but they couldn't get the win. Booker continued to light up the score sheets, dropping 44, but they still couldn't win as they lost to the Magic. Suns finally got them winning ways, taking down the Heat in a more balanced scoring effort. 4 players had at least 19. 6 players scored in double figures. Suns then won a shootout in KD's return to Brooklyn. Durant dropped 33 points with 8 dimes and 5 boards. Team's still trying to figure it out with the big three. Bradley Beal, he's still trying to find his place on the team. Booker's been cooking, and you can't really ask for the ball when a guy's cooking like that. But I think they'll figure it out, and congrats again to Devin Booker going to the All-Star game, joining All-Star starter Kevin Durant in that game. Back to LA, we go to the Lakers. Lake Show went 2-2 this past week. Absolute thrilling game against the Warriors. They went to overtime. Another classic with LeBron James and Steph Curry involved. Lakers winning that. And then they follow that up with back-to-back losses to the Rockets and Hawks. Then surprising to everyone, the Lakers would go into Boston and give the Celtics their third loss at home this season. They did it without Anthony Davis or LeBron James playing. This team is very hard to read. When LeBron and AD are doing this thing, as they have for most of the season, it's just hard to see who else is helping. The inconsistency. Austin Reeves balled out against the Celtics, but before that, it's been D'Angelo Russell balling. It's like, who's trying to play better now to stay with LA and not get traded? Because there's so much talk about the trading. Who's getting traded? This team's either on winning streaks or losing streaks. There's no consistency. Do they move Russell again? Do they move Reeves while the stock is hot? I don't know. Lots of uncertainty in La La Land. I'm interested to see what the front office does in the next week here. There's already lots of eyes on LA, and there's going to be even more. We'll wrap up the Pacific, going to the Golden State Warriors. They went 1-1 this past week, losing an OT to the Lakers in that game I alluded to. A nice 46-point outing by Steph Curry, with 3 other Warriors scoring at least 22 points or more: Kuminga, Wiggins, and Clay. Excuse me. The Warriors then followed that up by hosting the Sixers and beating Philly. That game where Embiid didn't look his normal self and had the lead, but Sixers still fought in that game, and the Warriors had to take it to the end. Curry, Kuminga, and Wiggins still played great. Kuminga's really stepped up his game, and he was saying, "Kerr, I need more playing time," and he's backing it up. If he keeps this up, and if Wiggins, he's looking like championship run Wiggins right now, and it's all kind of coinciding with the return of Draymond Green, And this team's been through a lot lately, like with the whole death of the assistant coach Decky. But this team, they're sitting outside of the play-in spots right now, and I see them going on a run. ASAP Rocky right now. You got winnable games against the Grizzlies, Hawks, Nets, possibly Embiidless 76ers. These are games they need to take advantage of. Don't be surprised if next episode I'm talking about Golden State's 6-game winning streak. And you know, the time is now. This is the time for the champions to remind us what champions are made of, right? We'll go to the last division in our NBA weekly recap, the Southwest, starting with the division-leading New Orleans Pelicans. Team with the 7th best record in the Western Conference went 1-3 this past week. Pels were pounded by a Thunder team before getting pounded even worse by the Milwaukee Bucks. Finally pulled their shit together enough to contend in a game and lost a close one to Boston. Then they bounced back and end their 3-game losing streak with a road win over the Rockets. I preach consistency on this podcast. The Pelicans are one of those teams that have not been demonstrating it right now. They've been struggling this past week. Those 2 losses to the Thunder and Bucks were embarrassing for a team of this caliber. Can't happen to a team with this much talent, you know. A few games they should win against Spurs and Raptors upcoming before facing the LA Gauntlet. So see if the Pels can play consistent. Have their high-profile guys, Zion, step up in high-profile games. Please, I want to see it. I've hyped this team up. Let's see the Pelicans play well when they're supposed to. Next up in the division, Dallas Mavericks. They went 2-2 this past week. Luka Doncic had that unreal 73 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists against the Hawks, reminding the team that drafted him and traded his draft rights, reminding him what they're missing. Imagine Luka in Atlanta. Ooh. Luka had another big night, this time a triple-double, with the Mavs would follow the Kings, and Luka again would put up unreal numbers, scoring 45, 15, and 9, with Tim Hardaway throwing up 36 in a tight win over the Magic. But then Luka would miss the next game against the Wolves, and the Mavs lost by 34. Kyrie missed all those games I mentioned this past week with a thumb injury, but it's looking like he should be coming back soon. With Kyrie and Luka, this team can compete in the West. Without both of them, they just kind of stay afloat. They're sitting in 8th right now, which is in a play-in spot, so anything can happen. You don't want to be there. Sticking in Texas, we go to Houston. The Rockets went 2-2 this past week. They crushed the Hornets before going into Brooklyn and losing by 2 to the Nets. The Rockets would then bounce back by crushing the Lakers, a game where Dylan the Villain Brooks was getting in the heads of the Lakers, getting Vanderbilt ejected, getting LeBron with a nice smack to the face, you know. Not a lot of basketball moves, but, you know, stuff that helped his team win. They'd follow that by dropping the game against the Pelicans, which I had just mentioned. Play Jalen Green, you know, it's been pretty good lately, reminding us why he was the number 2 overall pick in the 21 draft. Kind of a buzzkill for Rockets fans that Alperen Sengun didn't get into the All-Star game. The Turkish big has put up some pretty big numbers. The Rockets have cooled off a bit from their early, hot, surprising start. And, yeah, we had a little trade in the NBA involving 2 Southwest teams and injured players, too. The Rockets acquired the big Kiwi, Aquaman Steven Adams, from the Memphis Grizzlies in exchange for Victor Oladipo, 2 2024 second-round picks, and 1 2025 second-round pick. Feels like the 30-year-old big man has been in the league forever, Adams, and he'll be a great addition to this young Rockets squad. He's still out for injury for the rest of the season, but it's expected to make a full return next season. We'll go to Memphis. The Grizzlies went 1-3 this past week, surprising the Magic with a 1-point win. They lost some pretty close games to some pretty good teams, losing to the Pacers, Kings, and Cavs. They were in all those games, though, and it's amazing considering how depleted this team is, you know, with the jaw injury, the Bane injury, the Adams, who was now traded, his injury, the Clark injury, everyone's out, you know. And I just mentioned Adams moving to the Rockets. The Grizz got some draft picks, and it's Oladipo is the wild card in there. He hasn't played all year, still recovering from injury. But when this Grizzlies team finally gets in healthy, it'll be interesting to see what Oladipo can do, or if he's just going to be another movable piece here. Despite all these injuries and missing players I'm talking about, the Grizzlies, they're still out there battling every night. And I rip on Jaren Jackson Jr. and how it flabbergasts me that one of the best big men in the league has such low rebounding numbers, but he's put the scoring on himself lately, and he's been doing a great job. It's surprise players in the box score every night. Vince Williams, he's been lighting it up. G.G. Jackson, Scottie Pippen Jr., these guys are getting minutes and doing the most with it. The main thing is they're out there fighting for Taylor Jenkins, and if you see them on the schedule, don't count them out. We'll wrap up the team recaps, go to my San Antonio Spurs. They went 2-2 this past week. A rare winning streak, back-to-back wins at home, first over the Blazers, and then that stunner over the Timberwolves. Spurs would then lose the next 2 at home, first to the Wizards and then to the Magic. Number one overall pick, Victor Wembanyama, consistently throwing up double doubles lately, and in my opinion, he's regained the lead for that Rookie of the Year trophy. He does it all out there, and his paint intimidation is amazing. Watching games, people are aware he's there. When they enter the paint, they're looking. You can see the eyes going up. It's really cool to see. Vassell, he's been stepping up as a number two guy. Keldon Johnson's kind of disappearing here and there. I don't know Pop's lineup sometimes, but this is the youngest team in the league. They're taking their lumps. They're developing. They're trying to improve on the go. I'm loving Wemby's improvement. He seems like his patience is there and his rebounding numbers is going up. Jaren Jackson. But yeah, let's see. Another team recap in the books. How's your favorite team looking? Are you happy with your roster? You're like, okay, let's stick with these guys, or are you on the DMs of your favorite team's general manager saying, hey, make a change here? But hey, one more All-Star mention while we're on it. The Panini Rising Stars sound like a new sponsor there. The players were announced for that fun activity. It's a mini tournament with 4 teams and 3 games. The player pool consists of 11 NBA rookies, 10 second-year players, and 7 G League players. The 21 NBA players selected by the NBA assistant coaches will be drafted onto a 3-7 player team, and the 7 NBA G League players, they'll have their own team. They were comprised by the league office. Try not to lose me here. So it's 4 teams comprised of 7. Now to finally name these players, we'll start with the stacked rookies. Washington's Bilal Coulibaly, Wembanyama's teammate back in France. He's on the team. Utah's Keontae George putting up big numbers off the bench. New Orleans' Jordan Hawkins, last year's champ with the Yukon Huskies. When he does play, he puts up numbers. It's just getting him on the floor sometimes on that deep Pelicans team. Portland's Scoot Henderson was a little questionable, saying, hey, why was he drafted so high early on? But give him time. He's starting to develop here, and his consistency has looked good lately. I'm glad he's involved. OKC's got 2 players going. Chet Holmgren, he'll be in the game. Cason Wallace, I don't know how they keep finding him in OKC. Miami's Jaime Jaquez Jr., good to see him get involved. Dallas's Pogo Stick, Derek Lively III. Charlotte's Brandon Miller, he's been showing off lately, showing why he was the number 2 pick in the draft. Golden State, Brandon Podziemski. I don't think anyone had him in there. And of course, your boy Victor Wembanyama out of San Antonio. Excited to see him involved. He's made for All-Star games. Sophomores, New Orleans' Dyson Daniels, Detroit's Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey, Utah's Walker Kessler putting up big numbers off the bench, Indiana's Benedict Mathurin, he's a great Canadian player, love seeing him involved, Sacramento's Keegan Murray, you almost forget he's a sophomore, just he's such a solid player out there. Portland's Shaden Sharp, another Canadian. Houston's Jamari Smith Jr., loving how his game has improved. Jalen Williams, J-Dub from OKC, I mentioned how he's a legit second scorer. And a guy who will be in the actual All-Star game, Orlando's Paulo Banchero. Now, these names might not be mainstream yet, but 7 G League players who were named. Izan Almansa, Matas Buzelis, Ron Holland, last year's Slam Dunk Contest winner Mac McClung, Tyler Smith, Oscar Shishibwe, remember, who had his first points and they had to get the ball, which caused the big kerfluffle with the Bucks, and Alondas Williams. I'm looking forward to seeing what these young studs can do. A few of those guys will be draft eligible, so it's a good little preview here. We'll jump to an area that people like to decide who the All-Stars are. The stats, our scoring leader still 76ers big man Joel Embiid, leading the league at 35.3 a game, even though we're uncertain of what his playing will be like upcoming. Just behind him, Luka Doncic at 34.7 points per game. Amazing what numbers look like when you can drop 70 in a game like those guys have. Also above the 30-point per game mark, OKC Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo. Just behind that group is a group tied just above 28 points per game. Phoenix's Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and Cleveland's Donovan Mitchell. Rebounding leader, Sacramento's Domantas Sabonis, leading the league with 13 rebounds per game. Just behind him is Minnesota's Rudy Gobert, and Denver's Nikola Jokic, and Lakers' Anthony Davis. Each of those guys above 12 rebounds per game. Pacers' Tyrese Halliburton still leading the league in assists at 12.3. Behind him, current All-Star Game snub, Trae Young with 10.9 per game. Luka Doncic and Jokic are the only other players averaging over 9 assists per game. On the defensive side, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is still leading the league in steals per game, but Donovan Mitchell has closed the gap on him a bit. He's just behind him at 1.9 per game. Block leaders, Spurs dynamic rookie, Wembanyama. I told you I was scaring people in the paint, putting up 3.2 blocks per game. Behind him, Brook Lopez, 2.8. Walker Kessler, like I said, off the bench, averaging 2.7 per game. Imagine what he'd be averaging if he was starting. The Walker Kessler thing, that just blows my mind away. Another rookie, Chet Holmgren, 2.7 per game, and Anthony Davis at 2.6. Back to some team stuff. Rencity top 5 here. We got a bit of a change in the Rencity top 5. Not so much at the top. Boston Celtics still number 1. Minnesota Timberwolves number 2. Clippers, Los Angeles Clippers number 3. Oklahoma City Thunder number 4. And the New York Knicks at number 5. Some wild changes from the list from this week to last. Boston Celtics still staying at number 1 despite losing 2 games at home to the LA teams. I think they're still the best team in the league. I think Jaylen Brown will bounce back from that gross showing against the Lakers and remind people that he is a deserved All-Star. Timberwolves, they've had some immature moments and bounce back. The big part is the bounce back. They have a cocky, swag leader in Anthony Edwards. Love it. He backs up everything he says. He's the kind of leader you want. And I can't keep the Clippers off this list anymore. They have 2 All-Stars this season. They've been playing some of the best basketball. They had that tough loss against the Cavs, but other against that, this team's the real deal and it needs to be talked about more in title contention talk. I had the OKC Thunder drop a bit because you can't go into Detroit and start listening to the Pistons as a title contender. The Wolves lost, that can happen. But that Detroit play, that can't happen. You'll be off the list real quick. SGA, he's been consistent all season. I've heard that. I've beaten that word into the ground 1,000 times. So you know what I think of consistency and the importance of it. And the New York Knicks, yes, having them over the Nuggets, over the Bucks, and barely over the Cavs. The Cavs would have been my 5B if I rolled like that. But this Knicks team has won 9 in a row. And Jalen Brunson is showing all the haters he can lead this franchise despite of his size. The Randall injury, that's kind of big. That shoulder injury, but this team just steps up. The Knicks with Thibodeau, he plays hard minutes on these guys, but they back it up. We'll enter a little trophy talk, little MVP talk. The race has changed a bit. Joel Embiid, I had him in last episode moving to the front of this race, but his recent meniscus injury may have him into that less than 65 games threshold, which is what you need to win trophies. Brutal thing to happen, you never want to see injuries. I hate it. So who's going to take that spot? Well, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, my guy. Have him leading this race most of the season. Have him slithering back into that number 1 spot. Just behind him, I have Denver's Nikola Jokic. Just behind those two, I have a little group that features Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jason Tatum. Then I have a wild card group just behind them. Wild card bitches just behind them. Minnesota's Anthony Edwards, Clippers Kawhi Leonard, and some new cats at the party, because why not? All they do is win lately. The Knicks, Jalen Brunson, and Cleveland's Donovan Mitchell. Potential teammates in the future in New York. But hey, that's another conversation. This is an MVP conversation. MVP short story short. Embiid's recent injury woes, I have SGA leading the MVP race. Rookie of the Year, I mentioned a bit earlier. I have Wembanyama back in front of that pack. His play lately, despite minutes restriction, is amazing. He's leading that team. I know they're not getting the wins yet, but they did have a 2-game winning streak. But Chet's plays dipped a bit. That's helped Wemby's case a bit. I mentioned in Miami, Jakob Jr. isn't getting the same amount of time he was before the Rozier edition. And Brandon Miller, total opposite, with Rozier leaving town. His minutes have increased, and he's putting up some big numbers. I still think it's a 2-horse race. I don't know if Jakob Jr. or Miller has enough to catch those guys, but we'll see. Coach of the Year, it's a cluttered race as well. I still have Chris Finch of Minnesota leading that. OKC's Mark Daigneault, Boston's Missoula, and Cleveland's JB Bickerstaff just behind those guys. No, I'm not giving Doc Rivers it. Sorry. Sixth man of the year, I'm leaning towards Sacramento's Malik Monk. Tim Hardaway, he might get taken out of this. All those injuries in Dallas, he's had to start some games. Utah's Jordan Clarkson, Cleveland's Karis LeVert, they're in the chat and they're popping off. Trophy is not settled yet. Most improved player, I've not changed from my last few episodes. Bulls Kobe White and Atlanta's Jalen Johnson. I hope those guys get it. I still think everyone's going to want to give it to Maxey. But they just needed Harden out of the way. Maxey had this the whole time, but he might get it. Who knows? But he's got an all-star nod. Give it to one of those other guys. But hey, 14 weeks. We're in it, guys. Doing our thing. Back at it. Hope you get as much out of this as I do making it. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. games on the horizon. You know, for the most part, who should be involved. Got a little shootout happening. Steph Curry, the Warriors, having a shootout with WNBA sharpshooter Serena Ionescu. That was fun. We'll see what happens. Trade deadline coming up. Like I said, February 8th. Is your team going to make a trade that kickstarts the title run? Maybe you'll make a trade that will set up the potential future going forward. What's Doc going to do in Miami? What's up, Doc? What do you got? Thanks for tuning in. If you want more sports, tune in.